Good to see you again on our channel. David Coverdale, slumped in a leather couch, his face betraying a blend of longing and annoyance. Coverdale finally speaks up on the rifts, ego battles, and convoluted legacy of his ex-bandmate Ian Gillan today. Gillan, as lead singer of Deep Purple, has been lauded for decades as one of the most legendary voices in rock. A history of strife and personal hardships that few are willing to talk about hides beneath the formidable vocals and commanding stage presence. Envision Deep Purple in their heyday, the 1970s, when the band was dominating the hard rock scene, playing to sold-out crowds in arenas and setting the standard for thrilling live performances. However, just as the drums and guitars battled violently, so did the members' egos. Ian Gillan, a charismatic performer with a high-pitched voice, was frequently the focal point of the mayhem. It is well known that Gillan had a rocky relationship with guitarist Ritchie Blackmore. Blackmore was cold and calculated, while Gillan was impulsive and unpredictable. The two could not have been more different. Both the revolutionary albums Machine Head and the poisonous atmosphere inside the band were born out of their creative difficulties. Gillan despised Blackmore's domineering personality, and Blackmore frequently accused Gillan of being unprofessional. In 1973, at the height of their feud, Gillan quit the band suddenly, citing intolerable tensions and exhaustion from constant touring as his reasons. Coverdale joined a band that was already wounded by these tensions when he took over as vocalist for Deep Purple, replacing Gillan. In retrospect, he remembers the dark cloud that Gillan hung over the band, both as a singer and as a temperamental figure whose departure left scars that never really faded. The turmoil didn't end with Ritchie Blackmore, even though he was Ian Gillan's most notorious enemy. The inner workings of Deep Purple were a tinderbox, and Gillan's explosive personality frequently set off the explosion. Even though they both greatly admired Gillan's tremendous brilliance, Ian Pace and Roger Glover, they found it difficult to deal with his unpredictable behavior. In addition to creating music, being a part of the band meant weathering the storms that would inevitably follow Gillan. Both inspiring and frustrating, Gillan was known for saying what was on his mind without censorship or apology. During Gillan's angry outbursts, the calm and practical drummer Pace frequently found himself mediating. Disputes over the set list or the direction of a song would frequently become big feuds due to Gillan's anger. The more introverted and quiet Glover took a lot of the heat from Gillan's erratic behavior. Some of Deep Purple's most famous songs were born out of their creative partnership, but it cost them dearly emotionally. Reopening previously closed wounds, Gillan's return to the band in the mid-1980s was a wrenching experience. A fresh chapter was intended to be written with Deep Purple's resurgence, but instead, it turned into a battleground. In 1993, during recording sessions for The Battle Rage, this dysfunction was clearly demonstrated. It seemed as though the album's title reflected the band's reality, that they were at war with themselves, in a bleak way. The explosive nature of Gillan's relationship with Blackmore resurfaced during these sessions. Everyone was exhausted from the creative deadlock that ensued when Blackmore's meticulousness and Gillan's carefree attitude collided. Gillan would not budge and Blackmore would retreat deeper into his frosty, detached persona as arguments became the norm. The remaining members of Deep Purple were engulfed in the chaos, desperately attempting to keep everything together as the band's foundation crumbled once more. There was no room for compromise for Gillan. He was defined by his inflexibility, which served to feed his creativity but drove a wedge between him and those around him. His bandmates respected his dedication and honesty, but they frequently complained about how draining it was to play with him. His anarchy was more than simply annoying. It dissolved the band's foundational bond in the process. Blackmore finally decided to quit Deep Purple for good on the Battle Rages on tour, because he was sick of the constant tension. Although his departure signaled the end of an era, it also raised the lingering question of whether the band could have accomplished even more had their problems been handled. The lasting impact of these conflicts is both a blessing and a curse for Ian Gillan. His unwavering character and brilliant lead vocals were the driving forces behind Deep Purple's sound and energy, but they also caused the strife that plagued the band for years. As a reminder that brilliance and chaos can go hand in hand, his rage frequently cast a shadow on his relationships with Pace, Glover, and even the audience. Like his rock and roll career, Ian Gillan's life offstage was a whirlwind of intensity and disorder. Gillan emerged from a working-class background in Hounslow, London, where he was born in 1945, with an unquenchable thirst for success. The road to stardom would have a heavy personal price for Gillan, but ambition isn't always a blessing. His personal connections frequently came into conflict with the demands of his career, which caused emotional turmoil as his stars soared. The late 1960s were a hopeful time for Gillan and Braun, his spouse, as they began their marriage with the hope of a young love. He had lofty aspirations, but was still navigating the music industry at the moment. Braun was there for him as he rode the wave of popularity that came with Deep Purple to superstardom. Unfortunately, there were additional difficulties that came with celebrity. The late hours, constant touring, and stress of becoming a celebrity finally got to them. Being married to Gillan meant that Braun had to deal with the consequences of his erratic behavior and endure extended periods of separation. Gillan was an electrifying performer, but his dedication to his music occasionally took precedence over the more subdued, caring parts of family life. As the distance between his public image and his private obligations grew, tensions rose. The wounds on their bond were evidence of the strength needed to remain united in the dangerous and unpredictable world of rock and roll. Gillan's personal life was already complicated before he had to deal with his alcoholism. He became entangled in the glitz and glamour of the lifestyle that came with being a rock star, much like many of his contemporaries. As Deep Purple hit their peak in the 1970s, Gillan turned to heavy drinking as a coping mechanism for the relentless strains of fame. After a night of wild partying, I woke up exhausted, and the cycle continued, with little time for introspection or equilibrium. Both his health and his relationships suffered as a result of his alcoholism. His loved ones, who were unable to always reach him due to his celebrity, had to watch the toll it took on him. To alleviate the pressures of his job, which he inadvertently made worse, Gillan turned to alcohol, which served as both a release and a crutch. Gillan eventually confronted his problems head-on as the years passed. He started cutting back on his drinking in the 1980s after seeing the harm it was doing. There had been years of upheaval before this tipping point. Even though he managed to achieve some equilibrium, the scars from his struggles are still visible in the recollections of those who supported him and in the narratives of his career, which was marked by its ups and downs as much as its successes. Contrasts abound in Gillan's private life these days. He is still married to Braun, which is a sign of how strong they are, but the sacrifices they have made together mirror the difficulties of being famous. He is a reminder that even rock stars have frailties and problems, like the rest of us, as he battles alcoholism and the pressures of fame. Gillan sees the ups and downs of his own life as an extension of his legacy, which in turn reflects the myth and the man. With his towering vocals and magnetic stage presence, Ian Gillan defined Deep Purple's sound and cemented his place as one of the greatest frontmen in rock history. Fans are filled with awe whenever they hear his name. Gillan gave voice to classics like Smoke on the Water and Child in Time. But for those who were there, on stage, in the studio, or even on the tour bus, Gillan is as inspiring as he is controversial. A fiery temperament and a propensity for conflict accompanied his indisputable talent, leaving wounds as profound as his musical accomplishments. A darker aspect of Gillan's legacy, frequently overshadowed by the glare of celebrity, is brought to light by David Coverdale's choice to end his silence. Gillan was portrayed to the audience as the bold lead singer, delivering anthems with an unmatched energy. However, his obstinate character frequently caused tension behind the scenes, which would build up until it burst into full-blown anarchy. The harmony within Deep Purple and his relationships were often broken by his obsession with controlling every facet of his profession, which fueled his artistry. No matter how many shows Gillan puts on with Deep Purple, the specter of his past disputes follows him like a ghost. Those familiar with the history may see through the polished performances and hear the decades of battles that lurk beneath the music. His career is a complex web of highs and lows, showcasing a man of contrast who could bring people together around the world even as he tore the band apart that had propelled him to legendary status. Despite his intelligence, Gillan's explosive personality has both his strength and his weakness. On the one hand, his fervor and focus propelled Deep Purple to write and record some of the most memorable rock songs of all time. On the flip side, even his closest friends and family were turned off by his unyielding style. His intense nature left his bandmates disillusioned, even though they had earlier experienced camaraderie with him. Some found his intransigence laudable, but it caused division and left a wake of broken relationships and unresolved conflicts. How much of Ian Gillan's career was helped and how much was harmed by his relentless fire is an open topic. A man whose creativity appeared to be inseparable from his imperfections, his story is one of paradoxes. There was a price to pay for his unwavering commitment to his creative vision, but millions were inspired nonetheless. The global fan base was able to hear the band's internal strife through the same voice. Like the man himself, Ian Gillan's legacy is complicated. His story serves as both an inspiration and a warning about the toll that extraordinary achievement can take on ordinary people. His legacy will live on in rock lore, but it's a sobering reminder that even the biggest names in music may have a dark side. A legend molded by genius, hardship, and the permanent imprint of his raging personality, Ian Gillan's narrative includes both the bright spots and the dark corners.